clay pellets, hydrogen, or most commonly known as leca. Whatever you want to call these things, this is what we're going to talk about growing houseplants in today. Hello and welcome to Peggy's Plants, coming to you from the Florida Keys. Today I'd like to share with you step by step how I grow houseplants in leca. We're just going to call it leca today. About 5 years ago, I was watching a YouTube channel called Miss Orchid Girl, and that was my first time ever seeing anyone grow a plant in leca. So she got me so intrigued that I went out, I purchased some leca, and I purchased this orchid. This plant has been with me for 5 years. It's my first plant ever of any kind in leca, and it has done great. It blooms for me several times a year with minimal care. To be honest, this is the only way that I am able to keep orchids alive and blooming indoors. This is another orchid that I purchased around that same time period, and it too has bloomed for me a few times a year. I recently divided both of these orchids and really didn't expect blooms this year, but without fail, both of these orchids bloomed. With that success, I decided to expand into houseplants. So initially, I just started rooting houseplants in leca. I wasn't growing them in there. It wasn't until, I guess, about 6 months ago that I actually started growing my houseplants in leca, just putting them in there and actually leaving some. I do prefer to grow in soil, but leca makes it so easy. Especially if you travel a lot. There's definitely some benefits to growing in leca. If you travel a lot, you don't have to worry about watering your plants. It's kind of like a self-watering thing going on. So that definitely makes it convenient. And my rule of thumb is, if a plant will root in water, then you can probably grow it in leca. I've grown some of everything in leca and have definitely rooted anything that I've tried to in leca. And the advantage of rooting in leca is I've never had anything rot. So what exactly is leca? Leca is actually an acronym that stands for Lightweight Expanded Clay Aggregate, and it's used for growing plants, kind of like your soil. Simply put, leca is a porous clay pellet that absorbs water and also holds some air. To grow your plant in leca, the first thing you need to consider is your planting vessel. Pretty much anything that holds water will do. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. This Hoya is growing in leca, and it's in a self-watering pot that actually has a wick from the pot to the water. The next example I'm going to show you is also in a self-watering pot. There are some things you need to consider when using a self-watering pot, however. It is important to be able to tell where your water is, what your water level is in relation to your leca. And that's where it can get a little tricky with self-watering pots like this one, where you see a gauge telling you where your water is, but you can't exactly see where it is, where the height of it is on your leca or in relation to your plant roots. And you'll get a better understanding of why that's so important later in this video. Another easy vessel that I use is a simple plastic cup with a hole in it. And that hole is very important. Now, not everybody puts a hole in their vessels, but I'll show you why I prefer to only use things that I can put holes in other than the self-watering pots. So as you see here, a plastic cup with a hole. This is my vessel of choice in my grow tent. For one, if I knock it over, I don't have to worry about breaking glass or anything heavy landing on another plant. Also, they're inexpensive, so I can have as many as I need to for my cuttings in my grow tent. And I also like that they are recyclable. I can continue to use these same cups over and over again. My favorite vessel of choice by far is a glass cylinder like these that I purchased at the dollar store for $1. They're inexpensive and I just really like the way they look. One advantage of using the glass cylinders is that you're able to see the roots of your plants, like here. Also, you can see where the water level is and whether or not your hydrogen pellets, your leca, whether or not they're wicking up enough water to your roots. You can see exactly where the roots are getting the water, and also just see whether or not your roots are healthy. Now that we've talked about vessels, I'm going to show you how I transfer this Syngonium that has been growing in soil to leca. This Syngonium was given to me, and I really don't know much about Syngonium. So the first thing I did was a little research, and I found that it requires more water than watering more frequently than I usually water my plants. In those situations, I usually opt for a self-watering pot or leca. So that's how I came to my decision. So what I'm doing here, this plant was on my patio for a little bit, is I am just washing it down really well, trying to ensure that I'm not bringing any pest in with it. So I'm going to wash it down really well, and I'm going to really wash down the roots to remove any soil or debris. Now I have the plant immersed in a solution of water and neem oil, just in case there's any pest on the plant. Gives me a little bit more insurance. The last thing I want to do is bring a plant into my home with pests so that all the rest of my plants end up with a problem too. While the plant is soaking, I'm going to wash my clay pellets, my leca. I have used this leca before, and that's one thing I really like about leca. You can reuse it over and over again. It holds up, no problem. So I'm just giving it a good wash, a good rinsing. If you had a plant that had disease or something like that, you're going to need some kind of way of decontaminating it before you use it on your next plant. Just keep that in mind. If your leca is new, you're really going to have to spend some time washing it, rinsing it, draining it, because it tends to be extremely dusty and it's hard to get it out in just a couple of rinses. So now I'm just continuing to rinse it in a colander to make sure that I've gotten everything out of this leca, and then it's ready to use. Now I'm going to look over the plant and remove any leaves that look like they are dead or in the process of going that way. And also look at the root system. If there are any roots that are rotted or not viable, you want to remove those too. Now, one thing to know whenever you're transplanting anything into leca, there's going to be a period where your plant may look like it's dying, or you may see some roots dying. These roots, remember, are soil roots. They're used to growing in soil. So a lot of roots may very well die out, but your plant will grow water roots to replace those. The vessel I'll be using for this plant is actually a wine bottle that I cut off my first time trying to cut glass. It's not the best job, but it did it. I liked it because it's nice and wide. Now I'm going to stop here and show you one of the reasons why I put holes in my vessels. This is an orchid that I've been growing for some time, and when you do grow plants in leca, you're going to need to fertilize those plants so that they get nutrients. When you fertilize a plant, it will leave buildup of residue like salts and things like that needs to periodically be flushed from the plant, from the clay pellets. So that is one reason why I put a hole in my vessel. And I'll show you just how easy it is to flush your vessel, to flush the residue from your vessel. Right now, I'm just making sure my water is not cold. You never want to flush a plant with very cold water, so like lukewarm. And now I'm just running water, and as you can see, I have 2 holes in this vessel. The water is going in, down into the vessel, and you see it coming out of the holes. That is how you flush the salts and other residue from your vessel. Just that easy. If you did not have holes in your vessel, you have to fill the vessel with water, flip it upside down. Your plant's no longer in the same place. You've got clay pellets going everywhere. So that's reason number one why I always put holes in my vessels. Now, you all know that I like to keep everything very simple. So for fertilizer, I use it at 1/4 strength, and you realize that it sits there, so you don't need to keep adding. And I do not test the pH of my water or anything like that, and I've never had any problem. So if you're looking for pH and up and down and all that, I'm sure there's someone out here whose video will show you all of that stuff, but I'm not into science projects like that. I'm just growing my plants, and I guess if I started having a problem, I would look into it. But like I said, I've been growing in Leca for years, and so far I've had no need to do all of that. So now we're ready to get things going into the vessel. Now, the way I do it is I pour my leca in, and I like it to be just above the hole. And now you will see reason number two why I feel like this hole is so important, at least to the way I do things. You put the leca just above the hole. The point is you don't want your roots to be sitting in water, okay? You want the water to wick up to the roots, since these are soil roots. So putting the leca a little above the hole ensures that the roots are not sitting in the water, because if you put the water in higher than the hole, it's going to drain out. So now I'm holding up the plant and filling in the leca around the roots of the plant. Once I get things stable in here, no roots are in the water, but eventually roots will grow down into the water, but they'll be fine because they're used to it. These roots will not be sitting in water, so they'll be less inclined to rot. By tapping on the side of the glass, I'm causing any gaps to fill in. You want to make sure you have as few gaps as possible between your Leca clay pellets so that they can transfer the wicked water from one pellet to the next. So you want to fill the vessel until your plant is stable. Now all there's left to do is add water. I like to use a squeeze bottle with a long nozzle. It just makes it easier. And I have in this bottle my water, my fertilizer solution at 1/4 strength, which I always have on hand, and I'm going to fill it just to the bottom of the hole. Remember, if you overwater, it's just going to come out the hole, so you can never have to worry about the water level being too high. The beauty of this is I will not have to water this plant again until just about all of the water has evaporated from the vessel. And you'll be able to see exactly where the water level is, so you'll know exactly when that is. So it makes it easy when you're going on trips. There's no guesswork and when it comes to watering, and I've never lost a plant to rot. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is just like not all plants like to be water propagated, not all plants are going to like being in Leca. So if your plant starts to look like it's getting really droopy and it's not liking the experience, remove it before you lose your plant. This is what the Syngonium looks like after 2 weeks. It has adjusted very well. Many of the soil roots have died off as expected, and new roots are growing in. This is the exact same process I use to grow my orchids indoors in Leca, as well as to root cuttings. Well, that's about it. Thanks so much for joining me today. It's very much appreciated. Take care. Stay well. Bye-bye.